Hello. Well, it's September, and most of our children and young people have returned to school, or will be doing so very soon. Education is so important. Political parties always seem to make an emphasis on education, a key part of their manifesto. There's a constant drive for improvement. But what is it that our children really need to learn? What should we be wanting for our children? The Bible gives what might be an unexpected answer. Let me read the first part of Proverbs chapter 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behaviour, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance, for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. I think that passage highlights things that deep down are the things we know are important. Doing what is right, having the sense to make good choices. That's what we want our children to learn, isn't it? And not just our children. That's the sort of life that those of us who are older would like. So what is the secret? If we want to live well, Proverbs 1 verse 7 tells us where to begin. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. God needs to be the bedrock that not just our faith, but the whole of our lives are built on. If we want to live well, if we want our children to live well, if we want life to be all that it can be, we need to begin by seeing the whole of our lives lived before God, lived with God, lived in God. He made us, and only He can give us real wisdom. There is so much that you can know. You can study the stars or the atom. You can study chemistry or biology or medicine. But unless you can set that knowledge in the context of this being God's world and Him being sovereign over it, you will never be able to use that knowledge in the best way. But what about this strange phrase, the fear of the Lord? What's that all about? The fear of the Lord. When I was at primary school, there was one teacher I was definitely afraid of. Mr. Booker. He taught year 6. And from about year 4 onwards, I was worrying about going into his class. I'd only been in his class for a few weeks when I was off school with a mystery illness. Fear is a horrible thing. And of course, Proverbs isn't saying that we should be scared stiff of God. But it is saying that we should have a right view of who He is. The fear of the Lord is really being in awe of Him, honouring Him as God. It means taking God seriously. And Proverbs 1:7 tells us that unless we do that, we'll never be wise. As Timothy Keller says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, the way the alphabet is the beginning of reading. There is no wisdom at all without it. And that's a big challenge for our children and for us. It was said of the great scientist Michael Faraday that when he went into the laboratory, he forgot he was a Christian. And when he went to the prayer meeting, he forgot he was a scientist. And most people in our society, if they do believe in God, believe that He is irrelevant to real life. God is just concerned with some religious area of life. But Proverbs tells us that the opposite is true. You will never understand science unless you see it as the study of God's world. You will never understand sociology or psychology without seeing people as God's creation. You will never have genuine wisdom unless God is included in every area of life. That's where wisdom starts. The phrase, the fear of the Lord, comes 20 times in the Bible, and half of them are in Proverbs. In a book which is full of sound advice for living life well, that phrase comes over time and time again. Because the fear of the Lord means taking God's lordship over the whole of life seriously. It's not only the beginning of knowledge, it is the key to living life to the full. Proverbs 14:27 says, "The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life." The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. And actually, you can be one of the cleverest people in the world and yet still be a fool. Like many of the Proverbs, the two halves of verse 7 are opposites. On the one hand, knowledge. On the other hand, foolishness. Real wisdom is building your whole life on God. So the opposite of that, if you leave God out of your life, you're a fool. This passage has something important to say to us who are well beyond our school years. Learning to see the whole of our lives in relation to God, seeing how He is Lord not only of some spiritual area of life, but of our work, our hobbies, our relationships, everything we think and do and say, that takes a lifetime. But it also has something to say to us about our children. We're blessed to have a church school where children are taught about this being God's world. But still, in our secular educational environment, it's hard to teach every subject with God at the centre. Our children need us to show them what it means to live with the fear of the Lord. The children at Christ Church need to see that God is genuinely important to us, not just when we're at church, but all the time. They need to see that all we do acknowledges Him to be Lord. Children have so much to learn. The world is a wonderful place and school is so important. But those of us who are older need to play our part in helping them. Because if our children are to be all that they can be, here's the key. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And that is true for those of us who are older as well. As Psalm 111, which uses almost the same phrase, puts it, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow His precepts have good understanding. To Him belongs eternal praise.